Get in the car, now. This is a mistake. You got nothing on us. Save it, inside, now. All right. We'll sue you for this. Let's go. This is a mistake. I didn't do anything.
Sir, calm down. You're under arrest.
Arrest for what? Let go of me.
Stop resisting. Walk to the vehicle.
I want a lawyer. You have the right to remain silent. This is a mistake. Stop resisting. We didn't do anything. Save it. Keep moving. Get your hands off. Hands on the car, now. This is wrong.
Officer Vance Hargrove built his career on a simple, dirty formula: isolate, intimidate, and incarcerate. But when he slapped handcuffs on two quiet, disciplined men on a lonely stretch of highway, he did not realize he had just caught a pair of suspects. He had just declared war on the United States Navy. The sun beat down on the cracked asphalt of Highway 231, turning the Alabama heat into a visible, shimmering distortion. For the town of Cedar Grove, this stretch of road was not just a thoroughfare. It was a revenue stream. And Officer Vance Hargrove was the town's most profitable fisherman. Hargrove sat in his idling cruiser, the air conditioning blasting, a half-empty cup of stale coffee sitting in the console. Beside him sat Officer Bryce Tanner, a rookie who was already learning to keep his mouth shut and his eyes averted. Hargrove was a veteran, a thick-necked man whose uniform always seemed a size too small, straining around the waist and biceps. He had a reputation for bringing in more civil asset forfeiture dollars than the rest of the department combined. He did not just enforce the law. He manipulated it to fund the precinct and line his own pockets with overtime pay from court appearances. "Watch this one," Hargrove muttered, pointing a stubby finger at the radar gun. A sleek late-model black Chevy Tahoe was cruising smoothly down the left lane, doing exactly 65 in a 65 zone. It had out-of-state plates from Virginia. Perfect. Out-of-state drivers rarely returned to fight a ticket, and they were the easiest marks for highway shakedowns. "They aren't speeding, Vance," Tanner noted hesitantly. Hargrove scoffed, slamming the cruiser into gear. "They drifted over the yellow line. Failure to maintain lane. That's probable cause, Bryce. Learn it." Hargrove flipped on the light bar. The red and blue flashes reflected off the Tahoe's tinted rear window. The SUV did not speed up or hesitate. It immediately engaged its right blinker, smoothly changed lanes, and pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, coming to a textbook stop. "All right," Hargrove said, unbuckling his belt and resting his hand aggressively on the butt of his sidearm. "Let's see what the tourists have brought us today." Inside the Tahoe sat two men who had spent years surviving environments that would have made Hargrove weep. In the driver's seat was Chief Petty Officer Callum Reeves, a man whose calm demeanor masked a lethal, highly refined kinetic ability. In the passenger seat was Petty Officer First Class Declan Shaw, a towering figure built like a freight train, casually reading a paperback novel. Both men were dressed in plain civilian clothes, faded jeans, unbranded t-shirts, and combat boots. They were tired, hungry, and entirely uninterested in local small-town drama. Hargrove approached the driver's side window, projecting a swagger he had perfected over years of bullying terrified motorists. He tapped his mag light hard against the glass. The window slid down silently. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Hargrove barked, not bothering with a greeting. Callum Reeves did not flinch. He slowly reached into the breast pocket of his shirt, keeping his movements deliberate and visible. "Afternoon, officer. Is there a problem?" "The problem is you couldn't keep this oversized rig in your own lane." Hargrove lied smoothly, his eyes scanning the interior. He took in the two men, their muscular builds, and the tactical-looking canvas duffel bags in the back seat. Hargrove felt the familiar thrill of an easy score. Two out-of-towners in a nice vehicle carrying large bags. In Hargrove's mind, the script was already written. "I assure you, we were maintaining our lane," Reeves said evenly, handing over his Virginia driver's license and the vehicle registration. Hargrove snatched the cards. He did not even look at the names. He was too busy leaning in, sniffing the air theatrically. "I smell marijuana. Where is it? You boys moving way up the coast." Declan Shaw slowly closed his book, marking his page with a piece of scrap paper. He looked past Reeves, meeting Hargrove's eyes. "There are no drugs in this vehicle, officer. We are heading home." "I didn't ask you, passenger," Hargrove snapped. "Step out of the vehicle, both of you, now." Rookie Officer Tanner approached the passenger side looking nervous. Shaw looked at Tanner, gave a slight reassuring nod, and opened his door. Reeves did the same. "Hands on the hood," Hargrove yelled, escalating his volume to create a sense of chaos. It was a classic intimidation tactic, but there was absolutely no chaos. Reeves and Shaw moved with fluid, unnerving precision. They placed their hands flat on the hot metal of the Tahoe's hood, assuming a wide stance. They did not argue. They did not shout. They simply complied, radiating a cold, impenetrable calm that momentarily confused Hargrove. He was used to panic, to protests of "I know my rights," or to fear. This utter lack of reaction felt like a challenge. Hargrove began a rough, invasive pat-down of Reeves. "What's in the bags in the back?" "Personal effects and work equipment," Reeves answered calmly. "We'll see about that," Hargrove sneered. He yanked open the rear door and hauled one of the heavy green canvas duffel bags onto the pavement. He unzipped it. Inside, neatly packed, were tactical vests, advanced communication gear, helmets, and a sealed lockbox. "Well, well, well," Hargrove said, his eyes widening. "What kind of work requires level 4 body armor and military-grade comms? You boys part of some militia or maybe planning a bank job?" "We are active-duty military," Shaw stated clearly. "Our military identification is in our wallets." "Shut up," Hargrove roared, finding what he was really looking for. Tucked beside the gear was a thick manila envelope. Hargrove tore it open. Stacks of crisp $100 bills spilled out. It was their unit's per diem and operational cash, strictly documented and authorized for their cross-country logistical needs. "Bingo," Hargrove whispered, his greed taking over. "Drug money." "That is government property," Reeves said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying an authoritative edge that sent a shiver down Tanner's spine. "I highly recommend you check our IDs before you proceed any further." Hargrove laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "I don't care if you tell me you're the Pope. You're possessing a suspicious amount of undeclared currency alongside tactical gear. I'm seizing this cash in the vehicle under suspicion of narcotics trafficking. You're both under arrest." Hargrove yanked Reeves's arms behind his back and slapped the steel cuffs on his wrists, ratcheting them painfully tight. He expected a struggle. Instead, Reeves simply relaxed his shoulders, allowing his body to go limp to prevent joint damage. Shaw was cuffed by Tanner, who was apologizing under his breath. As they were shoved into the back of the sweltering police cruiser, Reeves caught Shaw's eye. A silent communication passed between the two Navy SEALs. They had endured interrogation resistance training that simulated brutal torture. A corrupt, overweight cop in an Alabama speed trap was nothing but a minor temporary inconvenience. They would let the man dig his own grave. The Cedar Grove Police Department smelled of pine cleaner and stale sweat. It was a cinder-block building, a monument to small-town bureaucracy. Desk Sergeant Roy Finnegan, a man whose primary physical activity consisted of chewing tobacco and operating a rubber stamp, looked up as Hargrove marched his two prisoners through the double doors. "Look what I pulled off the highway, Sarge," Hargrove announced proudly, dropping the heavy manila envelope of cash onto the booking counter. Two out-of-state runners, tactical gear, heavy cash, driving a $60,000 rig. Vehicle is already being towed to the impound lot. Finnegan eyed the money greedily before looking at the two men. Reeves and Shaw stood side by side, their posture immaculately straight, their expressions entirely blank. "Names," Finnegan grunted. "Callum Reeves." "Declan Shaw," Reeves answered. "What do you do for a living, boys?" Finnegan asked, booting up the ancient computer system. "We serve in the United States Navy," Shaw replied. Hargrove snorted. "Yeah, right." A couple of swab jockeys driving a luxury SUV with 10 grand in cash and body armor probably got kicked out of boot camp and decided to play cartel. "Empty your pockets." Reeves and Shaw complied. As Hargrove sifted through their belongings, he deliberately bypassed their dark green common access cards, their military IDs. He did not want the complication of military involvement on his paperwork until the forfeiture of the cash was fully processed. If he acknowledged they were active duty, there might be questions. If he booked them as unemployed drifters, the money would disappear into the precinct's discretionary fund soon enough. "You get one phone call," Hargrove said, unlocking the holding cell door. "Make it count. The public defender won't be available right away." Hargrove knew exactly what he was doing. They would spend time rotting in a concrete box, breaking their spirits before they ever saw a judge. Reeves stepped up to the wall-mounted payphone. He did not ask for a phone book. He did not call a panicked wife or a local attorney. He dialed a number from memory. In a heavily secured windowless office hundreds of miles away in Virginia, a secure line rang. It was picked up immediately. "Command Center." A crisp voice answered. "This is Chief Petty Officer Callum Reeves," Reeves said, his tone entirely casual. "Petty Officer First Class Declan Shaw and I have encountered a localized logistical issue. Status? Chief detained by local law enforcement, Cedar Grove, Alabama. Our vehicle, gear, and operational funds have been seized. We are currently in holding. Unjustified stop, false accusations of narcotics trafficking." There was a brief pause on the line. Then, "Are you or Shaw compromised physically?" "Negative. We are fully compliant. Just dealing with a local sheriff who wants to play highwayman." "Understood, Chief. Sit tight. Do not engage. We will handle the extraction." Reeves hung up the phone and walked back to the cell, sitting on the concrete bench next to Shaw. "Everything good?" Shaw asked quietly. "Yeah, the old man is going to be pissed about this, though." Reeves smirked slightly. Outside the cell, Hargrove was busy typing up his incident report. He was a master of creative fiction. He wrote that the suspects exhibited aggressive posturing and had bloodshot eyes consistent with substance abuse. He detailed the cash seizure under the Alabama Code regarding civil asset forfeiture. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was going to buy him that new base boat he had been eyeing. He looked over at Officer Tanner, who was staring uneasily at the cell. "What's your problem, Bryce?" Hargrove asked, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know, Vance," Tanner whispered. "They aren't acting right." "What do you mean?" "Usually people you lock up, they yell, they cry, they beg to call someone, they pace the cell. Look at them." Hargrove looked through the iron bars. Reeves was lying flat on the hard concrete floor, his hands folded over his chest, his breathing slow and rhythmic. He was asleep. Shaw was sitting against the wall, eyes closed, seemingly meditating. "They're just trying to act tough," Hargrove scoffed, though a tiny sliver of unease pricked the back of his neck. "Criminals know how to do time. Don't let it spook you." Hargrove checked on them periodically, trying to provoke a reaction. He served them stale bologna sandwiches and lukewarm tap water, taunting them about their money being gone forever. Reeves and Shaw simply ate their rations, thanked him politely, and went back to sitting in perfect silence. Their discipline was absolute. They were treating the Cedar Grove holding cell like a sensory deprivation exercise. The Cedar Grove County Courthouse was a brick building attached directly to the police station. Court was presided over by Judge Everett Langston, a tired, cynical man who had spent years rubber stamping whatever the local police put in front of him. He was a golfing buddy of the chief of police and did not like having his docket clogged with lengthy arguments. Hargrove handcuffed Reeves and Shaw together and marched them down the hallway into the courtroom. He was wearing his dress uniform, looking forward to the arraignment. He had already submitted the paperwork to initiate the permanent seizure of the Tahoe and the cash. "All right, let's get this over with," Hargrove muttered, pushing them into the defendant's box. "Stand up straight." The courtroom was mostly empty, save for a few locals waiting to pay traffic fines and a bailiff doing a crossword puzzle. Judge Langston walked in, a cup of coffee in hand, and took his seat behind the high wooden bench. He did not even look up at Reeves and Shaw. He just pulled the top file from his stack. "State of Alabama versus Callum Reeves and Declan Shaw," Judge Langston mumbled, adjusting his reading glasses. "Charges: suspicion of narcotics trafficking, failure to maintain lane, resisting arrest without violence. Prosecutor: how are we proceeding?" The assistant district attorney, a young man who looked like he had not slept in a week, stood up. "Your Honor, the state requests these men be held without bail pending a full investigation. Given they are from out of state and possess significant seized assets, they are a flight risk." "Makes sense," Judge Langston said, reaching for his gavel. "Any defense counsel present?" Reeves stepped forward. "Your Honor, we do not have local counsel. However, we were informed that representation would be arriving." Judge Langston sighed heavily. "Son, if your lawyer isn't here when I call the docket, you don't have a lawyer. I'm not delaying this court for some out-of-town ambulance chaser who can't read a map. Bail is denied. Remand them to county lockup." Hargrove smiled, a wide predatory grin. He turned to Tanner, who was standing by the door. "Told you. Hook, line, and sinker." Judge Langston raised his wooden gavel to strike the sound block and make it official. Before the wood could strike, the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a loud, resounding crash. The bailiff jumped, dropping his pen. Judge Everett Langston froze, his gavel suspended in the air. Hargrove spun around, his hand instinctively dropping to his duty belt. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom did not just open. They were thrust apart with a violent, synchronized force that echoed like a gunshot against the high plaster ceiling. The bailiff flinched, dropping his crossword puzzle to the floor. Judge Everett Langston froze, his wooden gavel suspended awkwardly in midair, the color draining from his cynical face. Officer Vance Hargrove spun around, his hand dropping instinctively to the leather holster on his duty belt, his heart hammering against his ribs. He expected to see a disgruntled local, maybe a drunken relative of someone he had locked up. He was not prepared for what was marching down the center aisle. Leading the formation was a man whose very presence commanded absolute suffocating authority. Vice Admiral Marcus Hale, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, strode into the Cedar Grove County Courthouse like he owned the building. He was dressed in his immaculate Navy service dress blue uniform, 3 silver stars gleaming flawlessly on his collar, a constellation of multicolored ribbons decorating his chest, signifying decades of highly classified, perilous service to the nation. His face was a mask of cold, chiseled granite, his eyes fixed dead ahead with a predatory focus. Flanking the Admiral were 4 individuals who looked entirely out of place in the dusty Alabama courtroom. 2 were Federal Bureau of Investigation agents in crisp, dark suits, their federal badges clearly visible on their belts. The other 2 were military personnel. A stern-faced Navy captain wearing the insignia of the Judge Advocate General's JAG Corps, and a heavily armed, severely unamused master-at-arms, his hand resting casually on a sidearm. The sheer psychological weight of their entrance sucked the oxygen out of the room. The rhythmic, heavy thud of their polished shoes against the hardwood floor sounded like a countdown to execution. "What is the meaning of this?" Judge Langston finally managed to sputter, his voice cracking. "Gan." The gavel slipping slightly in his sweaty palm. "This is a closed arraignment. You are disrupting my courtroom." Vice Admiral Hale did not slow his pace. He marched directly past the wooden barricade, completely ignoring the bailiff, who had instinctively stepped backward in fear. Hale stopped precisely 3 feet from the bench, staring up at Judge Langston with a gaze that could have cut glass. "I am Vice Admiral Marcus Hale, United States Navy." His voice resonated deep and echoing with absolute command. "And you, Judge, are currently holding 2 of my finest Tier 1 operators hostage under fraudulent, fabricated charges. You will release them into my custody immediately, or I will dismantle this county's legal infrastructure, brick by brick." Officer Hargrove's mouth went completely dry. A cold drop of sweat trailed down his thick neck. Tier 1 operators. The phrase echoed in his head, a horrifying realization dawning on him. He had not pulled over a couple of drug runners. He had ambushed the absolute apex predators of the United States military. He glanced at the holding box. Callum Reeves and Declan Shaw had not moved a muscle. They remained perfectly at attention, their expressions completely neutral, watching the destruction of their captors unfold with silent satisfaction. "Now see here, Admiral," Judge Langston stammered, trying to regain a shred of his local authority. He adjusted his glasses nervously. "These men are facing severe state felonies. They were apprehended transporting a massive quantity of undeclared currency and military-grade tactical equipment. My officer here, Officer Hargrove, had probable cause." "Your officer," interrupted Captain Elena Vargas, the JAG lawyer, stepping forward and dropping a massive, heavy leather binder onto the judge's bench with a resounding thud, "is a criminal operating under the color of law, and his probable cause is a fabricated lie easily disproven by a first-year law student." Captain Vargas did not wait for permission to speak. She flipped open the binder. A federal warrant was executed by the FBI Cyber Division on the Cedar Grove Police Department's internal servers. "We have obtained the dashcam footage from Officer Hargrove's cruiser, which he intentionally failed to log into evidence." Hargrove felt his knees go weak. He had wiped that drive. He was sure he had wiped it. The footage clearly shows that the vehicle driven by Chief Petty Officer Reeves and Petty Officer First Class Shaw maintained a perfect legal trajectory. Captain Vargas continued, her voice surgical and merciless. "There was no failure to maintain lane. The traffic stop was illegal. Furthermore, we pulled the satellite telematics data directly from the Tahoe's onboard computer. The steering wheel did not deviate a single degree from dead center for miles prior to the activation of your officer's emergency lights. Judge Langston swallowed hard, looking down at the stark, undeniable printed data graphs and the flash drive presented in the binder. As for the money, Captain Vargas pressed on, her eyes locking onto Hargrove, making him physically recoil. The cash seized by your department is heavily documented, sequentially tracked federal funds allocated for Operation Iron Resolve, a highly classified multi-agency training exercise. By seizing those funds, Officer Hargrove has essentially committed grand larceny against the United States Department of Defense. Wait, Hargrove interrupted, his voice pitching high with panic. He looked desperately at Rookie Officer Tanner, who was currently pressing himself against the back wall, looking as though he wished the floor would swallow him whole. They had body armor. They refused to answer my questions. They were acting extremely suspicious. Vice Admiral Hale slowly turned his head to look at Hargrove. The silence in the room was absolute and terrifying. Officer, Hale said, his tone dangerously quiet. You detained 2 men who have survived interrogations by foreign intelligence agencies. You locked them in a cage. Did you truly expect them to break down and cry for a small-town bully with a radar gun? Hale turned back to the judge. Judge Langston, Chief Petty Officer Reeves, and Petty Officer Shaw are on active federal orders. Your local jurisdiction over them is superseded by the Uniform Code of Military Justice and the immediate intervention of the Department of Justice. I strongly suggest you drop these charges right now, release their personal property, and let my men walk out of here. If you strike that gavel and remand them back to a cell, I promise you the Attorney General of the United States will be personally freezing every bank account tied to this municipality. Judge Langston looked from the furious, unyielding Admiral to the terrified, sweating police officer, and finally to the 2 quiet, lethal men in the defendant's box. The choice was not just clear. It was a matter of basic survival. Langston threw his gavel down onto the desk. It clattered harmlessly. All charges are dismissed with prejudice, Judge Langston said rapidly, his hands trembling as he hastily signed the release orders. Immediate release. The clerk will ensure the full return of all seized assets and property forthwith. Vice Admiral Hale gave a single curt nod. He turned to the defendant's box. Chief Reeves, Petty Officer Shaw, Hale ordered. Fall out. Reeves and Shaw finally moved. The bailiff scrambled over, his keys shaking so violently he dropped them twice before finally unlocking the heavy iron cuffs, binding the 2 seals together. Reeves rubbed his wrists once, a fleeting grimace of mild annoyance crossing his face before he and Shaw stepped out of the box. They walked over to the Admiral, stood at perfect attention, and delivered crisp, simultaneous salutes. Ready for duty, sir, Reeves said calmly, as if he had not just spent time sleeping on a concrete floor. Let's get your gear, gentlemen, Hale replied, returning the salute. We have a debriefing to attend. Hargrove let out a massive, shuddering breath. He had lost the money. He had lost the Tahoe, and he had suffered an incredibly humiliating public dressing down. But they were leaving. The military was taking their men and going back to their world. He had survived. He would just have to lay low for a while, write a few speeding tickets, and let the heat die down before he went hunting on Highway 231 again. He took a step toward the back exit, desperate to escape the courtroom. Hold it right there, Vance. Hargrove froze. The voice did not belong to the Admiral. It belonged to the older, gray-haired FBI special agent who had been standing silently near the door. Special agent in charge. Garrett Fletcher stepped forward, blocking Hargrove's path. He did not look angry. He looked profoundly satisfied, like a hunter who had just watched a wolf step squarely into a steel trap. "Where do you think you're going?" Fletcher asked, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a folded piece of paper. The judge dismissed the case. Hargrove stammered, his bravado entirely shattered. "The show is over. I'm going back to work. Your employment with the Cedar Grove Police Department was terminated approximately 5 minutes ago by the mayor, who is currently crying in his office," Fletcher said mildly, unfolding the paper. "You see, Vance, the Department of Justice has been investigating this little speed trap of yours for some time. We knew about the civil asset forfeiture abuse. We knew you were targeting out-of-state drivers, seizing cash, and funneling it into unchecked departmental accounts. The The problem was your victims were usually scared tourists who could not afford to travel back to Alabama to fight you in court. We needed a smoking gun. We needed a blatant, irrefutable violation of federal law with witnesses who would not be intimidated. Fletcher gestured toward Reeves and Shaw, who were quietly watching the scene unfold, their duffel bags now slung easily over their massive shoulders. When you illegally detained 2 active-duty federal servicemen and attempted to steal government operational funds, you crossed the line from local corruption to a massive federal crime. You did not just break the law, Hargrove. You handed us the entire corrupt enterprise on a silver platter. Fletcher looked at his partner, who unclipped a pair of heavy stainless steel handcuffs from his belt. Vance Hargrove, Fletcher stated, his voice ringing with absolute finality. You are under arrest for the violation of 18 U.S. Code Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, as well as federal wire fraud, grand larceny, and kidnapping. You have the right to remain silent. I highly suggest you use it because right now you sound like an idiot. You can't do this, Hargrove screamed, thrashing wildly as the federal agents grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back with practiced, brutal efficiency. Langston, do something. I made this town money. I protected this county. Judge Langston did not say a word. He looked down at his desk, pretending to read a blank sheet of paper. Hey. Terrified that if he made eye contact with the FBI agents, he would be next in handcuffs. As the cold steel snapped shut around Hargrove's thick wrists, a sound echoed from the back of the room. It was Rookie Officer Bryce Tanner. He was crying, his hands raised in the air, surrendering to absolutely no one. I'll talk, Tanner sobbed, the heavy guilt and terror breaking him completely. I'll tell you everything he did. I have his secondary ledger in my locker. Just please don't send me to federal prison. Fletcher smiled a grim, satisfied smile. We'll be happy to take your statements, son. As Hargrove was dragged out of his own courthouse, screaming and cursing, the reality of his devastating karma finally crashed down upon him. He was not just losing his badge, he was losing his freedom, his pension, and his identity. He was going to a federal penitentiary, a disgraced ex-cop, where his survival would be measured in agonizing, paranoid minutes. He had built his entire life on exploiting the weak, and the moment he tried to exploit the strong, his entire empire collapsed into dust. Outside in the humid Alabama air, Vice Admiral Hale stood by a black armored Suburban. Reeves and Shaw had already stowed their gear in the back. Are you gentlemen completely unharmed? Hale asked, his stern demeanor softening slightly now that they were away from the locals. We are, Admiral, Reeves replied. It was an excellent opportunity to practice our patience and meditation techniques. Hale let out a rare low chuckle. I'm sure it was. The DOJ sends their regards. They've been trying to nail that precinct to the wall for some time. You boys managed to do it just by sitting in a cell. Never underestimate the quiet strength of disciplined men who choose patience over panic. On a dusty Alabama highway, 2 Navy SEALs did not raise their voices, did not fight back, and did not beg. They simply stayed calm, stayed professional, and let a corrupt cop dig his own grave with every greedy decision he made. What looked like weakness to Officer Vance Hargrove was actually unbreakable steel, forged in the hardest training on Earth. That moment carries a powerful life lesson for every one of us. True power is not loud, flashy, or aggressive. Real power is the quiet confidence to hold your ground, trust the process, and let justice unfold in its own time. When you know who you are and what you stand for, no small-town bully with a badge can break you. The universe has a way of balancing the scales, especially when good men refuse to lower themselves to the level of their oppressors. So the next time life throws an unfair situation at you, whether it is a bad boss, a dishonest deal, or someone trying to intimidate you, remember those 2 SEALs sitting peacefully in that holding cell. Stay calm, stay disciplined, stay true. Your character will speak louder than any scream ever could, and the right people will always show up at exactly the right moment. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me, drop a comment below and tell me, what is one situation in your life right now where staying calm and disciplined could change everything? I read every single comment. And if you want more powerful real-life lessons wrapped in gripping stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Let's build a community of strong, thoughtful people who choose wisdom over reaction. See you in the next one. Stay unbreakable.